Okay, in this video I'm going to be looking at how high levels of population can hurt developing countries as well as corruption. So first of all, there are a lot of problems involved with the rapid rate of population of both these developing countries. Often the populations of low-income countries grow much faster than those in high-income countries. That can be for a range of reasons, including high infant mortality rates, religious beliefs, so they don't believe in contraception. They also see it as a way to generate higher incomes from child labour. So if by having more children, you can look after yourself, particularly in retirement, because they don't have an adequate welfare or pension system as well. So as you can see here, if you compare your low-income countries in terms of the birth rate per 100 people, that should be per 1,000 people, sorry, you can see that they're much, much higher in your low-income countries in Africa than they are in countries like Sweden and Australia, almost 3 times as high. So because of the lack of pension, because of the lack of contraception, because of the lack of education, that leads to issues associated with large population growth. So some of the problems associated with a large population, the first one relates to farming problems. So in rural areas, bigger families make it hard for people to feed themselves. So the more people there are within a family, it's harder to feed them off the land. They often have to overuse the land to produce goods and to produce food to live off, and that leads to less fertile land, which makes the land less productive and leads to lower incomes when they're trying to sell goods and services. There's also often very unequal ownership of land, so some people will own a majority of the land and they might decide not to farm it, basically to preserve it for the future, and that can also lead to high levels of unemployment and wasted output and even higher levels of poverty within these countries. So it can lead to farming problems. It can lead to urban problems in the sense that because of the inability to use fertile land, a lot of these people from rural areas are now moving to the city to try and find jobs in manufacturing. And often in these developing nations, there's a lack of infrastructure because of the lack of tax, and that leads to problems for things like transport, waste disposal. So often the cities are quite dirty, high levels of pollution. Not enough schools to be able to educate the people, limited water supply, limited health services in these areas. So a range of issues that occur from too many people living in the cities. Infrastructure problems, so the government often isn't able to have inadequate taxation revenue because of the high level of unemployment, because of corruption, because of tax evasion, because of higher subsistence living, and therefore they don't have the infrastructure designed to try and promote development. That leads to more congestion, reduced productivity, and then also because of the limited infrastructure, it really scares new businesses, particularly multinationals, from establishing themselves in these countries, and then therefore they don't get the benefits of the employment that comes from multinational companies as well. So there can be infrastructure problems, there can be unemployment problems. High rates of population growth often lead to high rates of unemployment. Also lots of underemployment where people aren't working as much as they would like to. High levels of unemployment, underemployment means that we're not using our resources and therefore we're working well within our PPF or our maximum productive capacity. That leads to lower incomes per person and exacerbates the problems associated with absolute poverty. So as you can see, a lot of these low-income countries, Zimbabwe, Nepal, Kenya, have really high unemployment rates. Over 80% of their labour force often can't find employment. Other problems with increased population, low levels of education and skills. They often have a highly unskilled workforce, and that leads to a lack of innovation, a lack of new ideas, a lack of ability to utilise technology and grow businesses. This is often a result of the government not having enough money to provide public schools and train staff to actually provide a quality education. Environmental problems, so higher populations can lead to higher pollution, overuse of natural resources and degradation of the environment. Often land will be cleared for agriculture. There'll be a lot of logging which will affect the ability of the quality of rainforest and natural resources and agricultural land. Clearing of forests, destroying habitat, so flora and fauna, soil erosion, reduced water supply, etc. So it can lead to high environmental problems because of the increased population as well. Another problem with low-income countries is the high level of corruption amongst governments. So low-income countries are often run by dictators and they can be involved in corruption. This is particularly a case when the countries aren't democratic. because that can lead to more corruption because they don't have to be voted in by the public, so they're less likely to act in the interests of the public. This leads to less economic progress because basically less money is redistributed to low-income countries, less money is devoted towards providing community services, so like providing infrastructure, like providing health and education, and more is put in towards things like the debt. Defence spending can often be overused, as well as other less productive uses as well. Democracies are often effective in ensuring there's less corruption because they at least need to be voted in, and therefore they're less likely to do the wrong thing by the public. Corruption can also lead to less foreign aid because developed nations don't want to give foreign aid to countries if they're not going to invest it properly, and that can be a problem as well. Thank you.